Hi, Bob from Pinegrow here with another tutorial. Bootstrap is a great framework that lets you put complex pages together quickly. Over the years, it has evolved and added in a number of features. Currently, Bootstrap 4 has about 1,500 classes. The Pinegrow web editor has a number of custom controls that allow you to better harness the power of Bootstrap. Even with these great tools, understanding how various elements are put together in Bootstrap can still be a little daunting. In this tutorial, I'm going to provide a simple step-by-step guide to putting together a nav bar with drop-down menu for language selection. Let's get started. For this project, I'm going to start with a blank Bootstrap 4 page and save it as a project. From the Pinegrow Start page, you can select either the New Page or Project icon here, or from the File menu, select New Page. Next, select the Bootstrap 4 framework, and then we're just going to use the index.html template. Next, we're going to save this page into a new folder so that we can open it as a project. So you should get this Open Project modal popping up, to which you can answer yes. Otherwise, navigate to your project folder and then select Open index.html as project if you don't see the modal. Now that we have our project saved, we can add a nav bar to our page in one of two different ways using the Pinegrow built-in library. So switching to the library, we can either use the Components tab, scroll down to the nav bars, and select one from the list, or we can type nav bar into the search box here and then find it quickly. I decided to select the one from the list because it has everything that we could possibly want already coded into the nav bar, including a drop-down menu. We can open an additional page view by clicking on the window plus icon located here, and then zoom out if we need to get it all in order to see what it would look like at the same time on both our desktop view and on our mobile view. If we just click here, we can see what the menu looks like there. Click here, we can see what it looks like here. Now let's format the drop-down item to make it into a trigger for changing the page language. It'd look great if we added some flag icons. GitHub has a great free asset for this in the form of a project called flag-icon-css, started by an author named Lipis, but it contains contribution by a number of authors, as you can see down here at the bottom. This repo also happens to be hosted by a number of content delivery networks, or CDNs, making adding it to our page fairly easy. So that's located here. Both of these links are in the video description. So navigating to the CDN for this repo, we can copy the link by clicking on the link icon, and then close this down, navigate back into Pinegrow, pull down our File menu, and since this is a CSS style sheet, we'll click on Manage Style Sheets. Next, we want to click on the Open URL tab and go ahead and paste that link in and click Add. Pinegrow will show us this tip. Click OK. And then we're just going to attach it to our index.html page. And close this. Okay, so now that we have our flags, we can change up the styling of our menu. The flags in this library are added using two different classes. One, flag-icon, and the other is flag-icon-XX, where the XX is the ISO country code. And I've put a link to the list of country codes in the video description as well, or within the text of the tutorial. Okay, so let's start styling. Navigate back to the tree panel, open this up, And let's just style the link name first. So you can see in the tree that we've got the Navbar item, and within that is the nav link. Go ahead and select that. Then we're going to go to the properties panel. And for the label, instead of drop-down link, we're going to say language. Okay, so now we have that language, that changed to language. Now we can return to the tree panel. This time we'll select the first drop-down item within that drop-down menu. Go back to our properties panel. And now we're going to change this label. So instead of action, and we could also change it here, doesn't matter, they're identical. We're going to change it out to indicate that we want to use a flag and that we want that to be an American flag and the language to be English. So for label, I'm going to put in a span with a class of flag icon and another class of flag icon US. Again, US is the 2-letter country code for the United States of America. Then I'm going to close out that span, put a space, and say English. Now if we click and look, we can see that our menu now has a nice flag and English as the language afterwards. So while we're in the properties panel, we can also change the href, or the target for this particular link. Since we're already in our English language page, all we're going to do is just make sure that if anybody clicks on this, that it redirects to this particular file. Now let's replace the labels of the other two drop-down items in a similar manner. Navigate back to the tree. Go ahead and pick our second drop-down item. Go back to the properties panel. Change your label and href. Okay, now our styling is done. You may have noticed that for the French page and the German page, that for the link, I prefix them with either an FR or a DE. This would indicate that when people click on those links, they should navigate to, the link should navigate to a subfolder, either FR or DE, and load the index.html page there. So in the case of this project, those don't actually exist. I would have to create them and, of course, translate them. At this point, we could leave the styling as it looks. However, if we want the existing drop-down as a language selector, it would probably be better if it was set off to the right side of the page and then still available in mobile view when this was collapsed. Let's take a look at the code and cover how Bootstrap handles Navbar collapse in mobile view. If we look over here in the tree, what we can see is that there's an overall container of Navbar, and that is set to expand on a large screen. So anything large or larger in the breakpoints will show the full size, whereas anything smaller than large will show the mobile view. Within that container, there is a space for our brand that will appear both in the full desktop and in the mobile view. And then a button with a class of Navbar Toggler. That Navbar Toggler is only shown in the mobile view and is set through attributes to specifically target this Navbar collapse container. So if we click on that and then go ahead and look at the properties, expand this down, we can see that it has as a data target Navbar Toggler 215 prefixed with that hash, and that means that it's an ID of Navbar Toggler 215. Going back to the code, we can see that this indeed has a hash Navbar Toggler 215. And you can look at that in properties too and see that it's there. So that toggler is set to the ID of the section that we want to toggle. Okay, so in the end, again, I want the drop down at the right side of the nav bar before the search element on desktop. So let's just turn this off and this off for now. Close this down. So I want it here on desktop, and I want it to still appear in the mobile just to the left of the toggle. So to do this, we're going to have to rearrange the order of elements and also alter their visibility on mobile. Plus, we'll actually make a duplicate of the menu to serve as the mobile menu. All right, so to do this, first we're going to go back to the tree. And then over here in our library, we're going to find a div. Going to drag it to the tree. And again, we want it just before the form. So we're going to have it here. We want to make sure it has the same indentation as our form. Next, with this div still selected, we want to open the properties panel. And then we're going to go ahead, remove this empty placeholder. And we're going to go ahead and add a new class. And we're going to make this into a dropdown. And so we can select that straight from the Bootstrap classes and get that added onto our div. Next, going back to the tree panel, we're going to go ahead and select the nav link and dropdown from our previous dropdown. So close this up. So we're going to want this one as well as this element. We're just going to hold Shift to select them both. And then we're going to put them inside of that new div. So drag them down, indent it one to make sure it goes in the right place. Okay, and then lastly, we're going to go ahead and delete this since it's no longer needed. And I actually have this off by 1. All right, so now we can see that our language menu has moved off from the end of the collapse list and is now just in front of the form submission. So we're okay on desktop, but we still don't have it viewed or still don't have it appearing on mobile. So how do we do this? So what we can do is we can keep this div selected in the tree view. Then we're going to go ahead and click duplicate. That'll make a new identical item. You can see that when Pinegrow scans the page, it actually now puts it as a button with the drop-down class. It's the exact same thing if we look at the code. It just is labeling it a little bit different. And we're going to go ahead and drag this newly created item up inside the Navbar Toggler, but before the span element. So we're just going to drag it right up here, keep it within the Navbar Toggler, and drop it. Okay, so now we can see that the menu is appearing in the mobile, but it's not in the correct position. It needs to be positioned in front of the toggle instead of on top of it. And so to do this, we're going to go ahead and change the styling. So with the drop-down button still selected within the tree, go ahead and open the Styles panel. Then we're just going to go ahead and add an inline style rather than adding this to our style sheet. This is completely up to you. You can also choose to add it to your style sheet. But all we're going to do is we're just going to scroll down here to display and then give it a display property of inline block. And that moves it properly in front of our mobile toggler. So now while that puts the drop down in the correct position, if we click on this toggle to open it, so go ahead and do that, click on the toggle, we can see that we have the language menu duplicated twice, and we don't want that. We only want to have it once. So let's hide that by adding some Bootstrap classes. So in this case, we're going to go back to our tree. We're going to go down and select this particular drop-down, the one that's visible on the desktop view. Then we're going to open the Properties panel. We're going to click on Add Class. And then we're going to assign two different classes from Bootstrap. D-none. This will cause it to be be set to a display of none on all screens. So small, extra small, large, extra large, any of them. But then we're going to tell it that if it's a large screen, to give it a display property of block. So we're just going to say D, large screen, block. And then click Add Class. We can now see that it has disappeared from our toggle, but still present there in our desktop display. And that's the sort of behavior we want. So while getting the styling exactly how we wanted it took a little bit of rearranging, I hope you can appreciate how easy it was to put together a drop-down menu in Bootstrap using Pinegrow. While this tutorial specifically put together a Navbar drop-down menu to change the site language, you could also use these same steps to do things like change the theme of your site. Additionally, we elected to redirect users to different pages for each language. Instead, we could have used JavaScript to change the visibility of alternate language sections or to toggle different color sets. This was a little beyond the scope of this tutorial, but we can discuss it further over in the Pinegrow forum. There's a link in the video description. I hope this tutorial will help someone in putting together a great looking dropdown using the Pinegrow web editor. Until the next time, have fun designing with Pinegrow.